Hey everyone, it's Naomi Wolf here. Hey everyone, it's Naomi Wolf here with DailyClout, and this is the first time we're live streaming from YouTube. So thank you for watching. Let me know if there's any problem hearing. I'm just going to sit up a little. I am talking to you today because I witnessed something that I hoped I would witness less and less. A couple of days ago, when I was walking in my neighborhood, I saw a group of peaceful protesters from the union 1199 SEIU, which is the Union for Healthcare Workers, were protesting outside of Lenox Health, which is part of Northwell Health, and it's a giant hospital which has opened up recently around the corner from where I live in the West Village of Manhattan. So these protesters were peacefully chanting, peacefully assembling on the sidewalk, but it was on the sidewalk to the south, about 100 feet of the entrance to Lenox Health, Greenwich Village, Northwell Health Hospital. And I was worried by that. I have a history, about caring about people knowing their rights to assemble on the sidewalk, especially in New York City, because many of you know that I was peacefully protesting in 2011 outside of an event to which I'd been invited, a Huffington Post influencers event, and I had written a book, Give Me Liberty, on the right to protest. I'm one of not many people, just because of my nerdiness about democracy, who knows about New York City permit law about protest and sidewalks. And so I knew that when my hands were handcuffed behind me by the NYPD senior officials, and I and my partner at that time were hustled into a police van and taken to we did not know where, away from eyewitnesses and observers, we knew, I certainly knew, my partner also knew, that that was totally against the law, and that the people who were protesting had every right to protest outside of the Huffington Post influencers event. So, New York City permit law, I'll get to it in a minute, but the purpose of this video is to tell you exactly what your rights are in New York City when you are protesting. And what I want you to know is that I can do these videos for every city in the nation, if not the world. That's the mission of DailyClout. But let's start with New York. It's got 8 million people, and the First Amendment protects freedom of assembly. So something else that really concerned me, this is the leaflet from SEIU explaining their situation. They said, we're members of 1199 Union, and we've been working to reach a fair contract agreement with management for the last 2 months. Management of the hospital wants to, they say, reduce their chance for professional training, reduce job stability, and cut their pensions. That's not that radical. And, even if it is, the First Amendment says you can have your say. But these workers were protesting peacefully against their pensions being cut by this employer. And they say management uses the argument that the facilities cannot afford the cost of our training, salaries, and pensions. So this is normal for unions to protest. Well, union membership has gone down dramatically. There's been what many would call a war on unions. And this is related to a war on First Amendment peaceful assembly. And so there used to be 30% of the workforce in unions in the 80s. Now it's down to in the teens percentage. And the war on the First Amendment is part of this, because if you can't disrupt business as usual, whoever you are, whether you're in a union or not, then your protest is really ineffective. So, and I mean peacefully disrupting business as usual. So then I asked the organizer, do you know that you have the right to protest outside of the entrance? And she said, the security people at the hospital told us that we had to move away from the entrance and, move all the way down the sidewalk, far from where customers of the hospital would be inconvenienced or learn about the conflict, which is what opponents of a union picket obviously want to do. So that's what was happening. People were going in and out of the hospital with no knowledge of what the issue was. And so they didn't have the option to not cross the picket line if they supported the workers' demands. So I said, look, I've been through this. I'm a New York City permit nerd. You have every right to protest outside the hospital. And then I went inside the hospital and I asked the security staff, and they said, no, we didn't say that. And then they gave me this letter, which is what people who ask about this at the hospital are given. It's from Alex Hellinger, the executive director of the hospital, and it misinforms people, I'm sorry to say. It said the employees in front of the hospital are members of the union and are engaged in, quote, informational picketing, end quote. This is a normal and accepted part of union negotiations. They have the right to express their opinions, and the hospital respects that right, even though we do not always agree. And then it said your care or that of your loved ones at the hospital, in bold, is not in any of our locations is not being affected in any way by the union's informational picketing. The employees who are participating in the picketing are doing so on their own time. Well, it's not informational picketing. They have every right legally to, block, or not block the entrance, but to confront people who are walking in and out, as long as they don't block the entrance, or the power of people passing back and forth on the street. And I'll get to that. So this is just frankly misleading, telling patients of this hospital that's being picketed by their workers that it's nothing but informational picketing that these people are doing on their own time. They may be doing it on their own time, but it's actual picketing. And so this makes it seem like, especially because the picketers were all the way down at the end of the sidewalk, like 100 feet away, chanting to the wall, right? Chanting to the subway station, far away from the entrance to the hospital. This misleads customers coming to the hospital into thinking that, they just want to express their views. No, it's a picket line. The goal of the picket line is to encourage people to not cross the picket line, to show support, and to learn about the conflict. So I'm very disappointed in that. And having said that, I want to go to telling you what your rights are in New York City to picket. Because this comes up over and over, again and again. People who are trying to protest and use their First Amendment freedom of assembly are told by police, you're not allowed to be here, or are told by private companies, you're not allowed to be here. This really reached a head in the last 3 or 4 years in New York, because after Occupy protested effectively at banks, banks now hire NYPD to stand inside the bank. This is true at Chase, it's true at TD Bank, it's true in banks all over the city, thus creating a total conflict of interest and deterring anyone from peaceful protest outside a bank, let alone inside. So what you should know, and this is from the New York Civil Liberties Union, God bless them, from their website, is the first thing is that you have the right to protest publicly on public streets in New York City, number one. This includes the right to distribute handbills or leaflets, the right to hold press conferences, demonstrations and rallies, and the right to march on public sidewalks and in public streets. The city can and does impose certain restrictions, and in some cases, you have to obtain a permit. But this tells you what those cases are. Generally, you have that right. First Amendment says freedom of assembly to petition government for redress of grievances. Number one, question, do I need a permit? If you want to protest right now in New York, whatever it is you don't like, pollution of the air, or police brutality, Black Lives Matter, so many issues. Or you want to support the police, or you want to make sure that first responders get proper medical care. So many issues in a living city that citizens should be protesting about, student debt, You should be protesting whatever it is you don't like, right? We forget that. It's not aberrant behavior. In America, in any democracy, you should be protesting as a matter of course in the streets peacefully. So do you need a permit? You have the right to do that. If you want to distribute handbills, have a demonstration, rally or press conference, you don't need a permit. If you want to use amplified sound on public property, you want to have an event with more than 20 people in a New York City park, or you wish to conduct a march in a public street, you will need a permit. Okay, so that's very specific. You can get all your friends and neighbors and networks to march on the sidewalk without a permit. You can get up to 20 people to hold a rally in a New York City park. But if you also want to conduct a procession involving 50 or more vehicles or bicycles in a public street, if you wish to have an event on the steps of City Hall or in the plaza in front of the steps, you need to make special arrangements with the police department. And let me stress, that means if I want to distribute handbills, have a demonstration, rally, press conference, or march on a public sidewalk, what do I need to do? I can't say this enough. Quote unquote, nothing but plan your event. You can notify the police department, but that is not required. If you do not notify the police department, officers may appear at the event. If your event involves a significant number of people, the police department may set up a quote pen in which they will ask you to stand. You are not required to stay in a pen. Listen to that again. They can ask you, they can set it up. You are not required to stay in a pen. In conducting your event, you cannot block pedestrian passage on a sidewalk, so you should leave at least one half of the sidewalk free, and you cannot block building entrances. I'm going to say this again to be super clear to the 8 million people of New York City. If today you want to take as many people as you want, as you can get to join you, to march on the sidewalks of New York City, you can march up and down the city, inside and outside of the city, right? You can march in all the boroughs. You do not need to notify the police as long as you leave about half the sidewalk free for pedestrians to pass and don't block entrances to the building. If the police set up a pen to hold you, if you get thousands and thousands of people to turn out, God bless you. They have no right to make you do so. You do not need to go into the pen. I can't say that clearly enough, and you do not need a permit. All right. So what if I want to march in the street, right? To take to the streets. And again, studying democracies, when democracies are closing, marching in the streets is super effective, stopping business as usual peacefully. You may be able to march in a public street, says the New York CLU, as opposed to on a sidewalk in some cases. To march in a street, you do need to obtain a permit from the police department. If you expect to have fewer than 1,000 people in your march, you can apply for a permit at the precinct where your march is going to originate. If you expect more than 1,000 or you want to use mail, the the website where you need to send it is to the, oh, that's intimidating, NYPD investigation review section in Brooklyn. And we'll post that on DailyClout, the address, or you can see it on the NYCLU website. And then there is no fee to apply. And as a general rule, the police department will only allow marches to take place in the street if the group has enough people so it's not reasonable for them to march on the sidewalk. To me, this seems like a very restrictive statute or regulation, because how do you know in advance how many people you'll have, A, and B, who decides that it's reasonable? As an American citizen, reading the First Amendment, it's extremely reasonable to have thousands of people marching in the sidewalk and stopping traffic if thousands of people want to join a march. And then you should notify the police, of course. You don't want anyone to get hurt or cause an accident. But to preventively say you can't march in the street because you need to know magically how many people will join you is just a deterrent, as is, I think, this destination where you need to apply for a permit that says it's investigations. I mean, how deterring is that? Quite deterring. All right, what if, can I have a vehicle or bicycle? procession in a public street, you are entitled to drive a ride as a group. But if you have 50 or more vehicles or bicycles, you will need to obtain a parade permit. And the permit applications are handled in the same way. What if I want to use amplified sound? If you do want to use amplified sound in a public place, you must get a permit. And you can download a permit application from the front page of NYPD's website. And it's a one-time sound permit. It costs $45. Ideally, city rules say you have to seek a permit 5 days before the event, or and you can't use amplified sound within 500 feet of a school, courthouse, or church during the hours that people go there. In many instances, the permit may specify a decibel limit or the level of permissible sound. City rules also prohibit the use of amplified sound between 10 a.m. and 9 a.m. in non-residential areas. In residential areas, amplified sound is not permitted between 8 p.m. or sunset, whichever is later, and 9 a.m. So you can use amplified sound. You can't tap into public power. You have to check that you're doing it in a way that's not disruptive during the hours that are specified. And there may be a level on decibels. I have to say, I find this also extraordinary, because if you go to Union Square, there's loud music blaring from Forever 21 and all of these retail stores, but they can tell you that you need to watch your decibel level if you have a rally and read the Constitution of the United States. I don't think that's in alignment with our First Amendment rights, but I appreciate we're in a crowded city. All right, what if I want to have an event in front of City Hall? We're citizens of New York City. Our mayor and our administration is at City Hall. They should be able to see when we're upset about something. You are entitled to have a rally, press conference, or demonstration on the steps of City Hall or in the plaza directly in front of the steps. City Hall Park is also open for these events, but they're subject to the same rules for parks in general. You do not need a permit for events in front of City Hall, but you do need to schedule your event with police department officials. So you don't need a permit. You don't need to go through that process. To rally in front of City Hall, just call the NYPD Precinct 5 Community Affairs Division. We'll post this information on DailyClout at 212-341-5063. Though you're entitled to have an event, there are certain restrictions at City Hall. Groups are limited to 300 people. And only a portion of steps may be used. And all attending an event must pass through a metal detector. Again, of course, reasonable to pass through a metal detector. But how do the police know if there are going to be more than 300 people at the event? What if it attracts more than 300 people? For a democracy to be alive, protest has to be organic. Obviously, minimizing the chance that anyone will get hurt or sleep will be disrupted. You have to be able to hold an event on the steps of City Hall and have gazillions of people come because they see what you're protesting or hear about it on social media and decide to run down there. What else should I know? The most important thing you can do to ease the permit process is to apply for your permit as early as possible. Be persistent, keep copies of paperwork you submit, and have the names of the public officials with whom you deal. In many instances, groups holding events on public property in New York City, whether with a permit or otherwise, will be contacted by the police about the event so the department can plan for it. The department is allowed to seek such information, but you are not obligated to provide it. You don't have to answer them. There is nothing that says that you do. If you opt not to, you are free to do so. You are free to use signs at your event, but the police department does not want them affixed to wooden sticks or metal poles. Hold them or use cardboard tubing. Okay. Signs are not permitted to be affixed to public property, such as light posts or police banners. So there you have it. That's our report about what ingredients you need to hold a rally, a protest, to pass out leaflets, to use amplified sound, to march in the street, to march on the sidewalks, to picket in front of a hospital building, or to have your say, to go to City Hall, to have your say about any aspect of any issue, nationally, globally, or locally, that is going on in New York City. Don't let anyone tell you that you do not have these rights. You have these rights. You can check the NCLU website. We'll post this on DailyClout.io. And, go protest. Our founders were very clear that the First Amendment came first. The Boston Tea Party was disruptive. This is not a partisan issue. Americans who invented democracy knew that you have to have people assembling freely in public spaces, disrupting business as usual, making noise, or else democracy is meaningless. It's there in name only. So this is for New York City. We'll be making these reports for anyone who asks via DailyClout for any city in the United States and in any of the 132 democracies worldwide. This is Naomi Wolf. Happy protesting, happy peaceful protesting. Raise your voice. DailyClout. Bye-bye.